In some galaxies, love is forbidden, warmth is treated like a virus, and caring is a weakness that gets you killed. Raek, commander of the Varkari warriors, had conquered moons without blinking. He had ordered thousands of lives to be erased without a second thought. His hands had never trembled until the day they touched something that wasn't built from code, strategy, or silence. A woman, soft, fragile, human. She was dragged from the wreckage of a burned-out ship, pulled from the sands of the Karun desert. She was supposed to be his prisoner. But when she opened her eyes, wild, defiant, delicate, something ancient cracked inside his armored chest. He was born to conquer, but no one ever taught him what to do, when the thing he wanted to protect most was the very thing his world wanted to destroy. Lyra didn't remember the crash, only the screaming silence afterward. She woke up on a cold rock. Skin scraped, breath shallow. The cave around her glowed with green biolight, flickering like restless spirits. Her wrists were bound by metal threads, soft as fabric but impossible to break. Her ship was gone, her suit torn, the air thin and buzzing with static. Figures moved silently in the dark, tall, skin glinting like silver under moonlight, eyes glowing not from wonder but judgment. She had read about Varkari, a wild moon on the edge of the galaxy. No maps, no diplomacy, just rumors of war rights, emotionless tribes, and laws carved into bone. She never believed the place was real, until one of them stepped forward, taller than the rest. Armor etched with forgotten symbols, half his face hidden behind a mask, the other half scarred as if he wore his wounds on purpose, refusing to let time soften them. He stared at her without speaking, didn't blink, then said something in a language she couldn't understand. Another one, smaller, let out a sharp growl. A blade flashed. Lyra flinched, but the tall one, Raek, caught the blade in midair, snapped it with his bare hand, then spoke a single sentence. His voice rough and low, "She carries fire. None of you will touch her." The others stepped back. Lyra didn't understand the words, but she understood the look in his eyes, not warm, not kind, but curious, like a machine hearing music for the first time and not knowing whether to destroy it or kneel. Lyra woke up in a strange light, a deep violet glow like dried blood under cold space. She was inside a cell made of metal that didn't reflect, didn't hold heat. No windows, no voices, just her own breathing through a mask and silent eyes watching her from beyond the bars. The Varkari, they didn't speak, they didn't smile. They looked at her like an ancient anomaly. Not terrifying, not sacred, just different. They were tall, with ash-silver skin and black eyes that seemed bottomless. Every movement was calculated, mechanical, like emotions had been removed in some long-forgotten ritual. Some of them hung her up like an offering. Some poked at her wounds like testing broken merchandise. But one of them stood apart, not kind, but not like the others. Raek. No one said if he was their leader, but when he stared, the others backed off. He asked no questions, just watched. But in his gaze, something lived. Not anger, not mercy. Just a silent ember buried under centuries of cold logic. In a silent ritual, Lyra was brought to a gray stone square. The Varkari stood in a circle. No chants, no drums, only cold eyes like dust. A blade touched her neck. An execution, a declaration of conquest. Raek appeared. He didn't speak, didn't physically stop it. He just looked straight into the eyes of the one holding the blade. The blade stopped. She was taken back to her cell. But this time, there was a bowl in front of her. Food, something like sweet sea moss glowing purple. She looked up. Raek was standing there, no gestures. He simply left the bowl and walked away. On the third night, a magnetic storm swept across the planet. Electromagnetic waves made the steel ceiling rumble like thunder. No one came, no alarms. Lyra curled in the corner, back bare, the cold biting like ice across her skin. Then the door opened. Raek stood there, no armor, just carrying a layer of woven light, his inner armor. He walked slowly, like unsure of his own intentions, then knelt, gently draped the armor over her shoulders. Each movement broke an ancient taboo his people had lived by. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice cracked the silence. He didn't answer, just looked at her, not as a commander, not as a judge, but with the eyes of a being who, for the first time, realized he could choose not to be like the rest. Raek never asked about Earth. He never glanced at the wreckage Lyra once called home. But one day, when she asked to return to the ship, to retrieve something, Raek stood there, silent, not stopping her, not granting permission, just following. Inside the shattered cockpit, Lyra dug through the emergency kit. She pulled out a small device. It looked like a glowing mask. "This measures body heat," she said, "but I use it for something more fun." She placed it in his palm. The screen blinked. 33, 1 degrees C, your body is colder than most, but when you're angry, it rises. Raek said nothing, but when she placed her hand on his, the device beeped. 34, 5 degrees CC, I call it fire in the blood. For the first time, his gaze wavered. In the days after, Lyra restarted part of her ship's broadcast system. Only fragments remained, a chop-in nocturne, a Navajo lullaby. She played them in the stone chamber where Raek meditated. Did you know fire doesn't only live in the heart, it's in the music too? Raek closed his eyes. A low note lingered, then vanished. "This is emotion," she whispered. No words, no winning. He opened his eyes, but didn't look at her. One night, she made soup from roots the Varkari used for medicine. She blended them with honey, what little she had left. When she handed it to Raek, he froze. Sweet, just one word, but for the first time, not hollow. Still, change doesn't go unnoticed. Karin, Raek's longtime guard, loyal since the Gorgix War, began to watch in silence. "Our chieftain is no longer the same," he whispered to the others. "He's grown weak because of that creature." That night, Lyra went to the stream for water. Under an ancient tree, Karin was waiting. "What are you to make Raek forget his honor?" Lyra stepped back. A chill spread through her like bone-deep frost. Karin drew his plasma blade. "We are warriors, not babysitters for something that cries." He lunged, but he never reached her. Raek was already there, a single strike, lightning silent. Karin fell, no questions, no mercy. In front of the stunned warriors, Raek spoke. "From this moment on, she is the flame bearer. Whoever touches her betrays our people." A breeze moved through the stone valley. No one met Raek's eyes, not out of fear, but because they saw something new inside them. Fire, not born of war, but of protection. Lyra was no longer a prisoner, but she wasn't truly free either. She was allowed to walk the central grounds. Ancient stone temples draped in moss. Silent corridors that led to the elders' archives. There, she saw memories the Varkari tried to bury. On faded murals, cracked by time, were figures that didn't look like Varkari. Their hands were small. No horns, soft skin, wide eyes, just like hers. "These are humans," Raek said. "Your ancestors." She turned to him. "They once lived among you?" Raek nodded slightly. "They called us the Inspired, because we sang, we carved stone, we lit crystals to capture emotions. Each warrior carried a melody like a fingerprint of the soul." She whispered, "But now we are shells, flesh that fights, not allowed to remember music." Lyra stood before a broken instrument, covered in dust, strings torn. "What happened?" Raek didn't answer at first. Then, after a long silence, he spoke. "We believed in peace. But the humans, they didn't come to learn, they came to steal the heartbeat they had lost. When they betrayed us, when they killed our last flame singer, the elders sealed away all feeling. They called it the unbinding. No emotions, no pain, no memories, no betrayal." Lyra clenched her fists. "And now, what am I to you?" Raek looked straight at her. "You are a threat. A forgotten song returning in the dreams of soldiers. A flame in a world where we allow only ice." That night, in the deepest stone chamber, the Varkari council gathered. Elder Surith, scar running from brow to throat, struck the floor with his staff. Raek is faltering. He listens to music. He feels, if this continues, we'll fall again. Another warrior whispered, but he's stronger than any of us. If even Raek no longer believes in the seal, what meaning does the curse hold? At that same moment, Raek sat alone by the ancient stone platform. Once, it was a sacred stage for song. He held the broken instrument. No one had taught him, but his fingers moved, guided by a memory not fully his own. A sound rose, clumsy but alive, and from the shadows Lyra listened, not just to the sound of strings, but to something deeper, a primitive heart beating from stone. Later, as she approached, Raek didn't turn. He only said, "If I let myself feel something for you, am I betraying my entire species?" Lyra stepped close. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder. "You're not betraying anyone. If what you're feeling is something your people once had and simply forgot how to hold." For the first time, Raek tilted his head. That touch. It wasn't cold. It wasn't logic. It wasn't war. It was someone beginning to remember what it once meant to be human. The warning came at dawn. A pulse of electromagnetic light cut across the Varkari sky. It wasn't theirs. Galactic Union Rescue Unit. Message received. Extraction team en route. The words echoed through the valley like a blade, slicing through the fragile peace Lyra, and Raek had just begun to build. She sat in silence atop the stone roof, staring at the faint halo where the galaxy began to wake. Raek stood behind her, his fingers clenched around the hilt of his blade, his violet eyes deep as the void. "They're coming for you. They think you've been taken. They think I'm a monster." He wasn't angry, just hollow. Lyra didn't turn. "I know I can't stop them. If you go, no one will blame you." He exhaled, voice low as dying embers. "Or you can stay and make this world burn again. Burn not in flame, but in what the Varkari had smothered for centuries. Emotion." Inside Lyra, a storm rose. She remembered the roar of the rescue engines, the sterile light of the med bay, the cold hands of her own kind, always certain that rescue was one-directional and that love never made logical sense. But here, she had watched a warrior learn to feel, watched a species remember how to breathe with compassion. That night, Lyra stepped quietly into the old comms room, a ghost left behind from the wrecked ship. Her hand hovered over the console, fingers trembling. A signal was ready, SOS confirmed. A flight path loaded, one button and she'd go home. Instead, she opened the panel, removed the beacon, cut the main wire, and rewrote the message. On the screen, the final characters glowed. Her hand shook slightly. "Goodbye," she whispered. "Goodbye, old world." When she returned, Raek was waiting at the stone steps. "What did you choose?" His voice couldn't hide the pain. She looked at him, didn't smile, just stepped closer, placing her palm on his chest where the armor was always cold. "I'm not a hostage. I'm not a guest. I am fire, and fire never asks for the way home." Raek stood still. No logic, no training, no survival doctrine could prepare him for this moment when a human chose to stay, not for duty, not for safety, but because of a look. That night, the warriors gathered around the ancient flame pillar, once extinguished after humanity's betrayal. Raek stepped forward and declared, "From this day forward, we do more than survive. We remember, we feel, and we love." Under the red glow of distant stars, Lyra stood, no longer a victim, no longer a stranger. She was the memory bringer, the flame bearer. There was no coronation, no throne. No one sang their names, but in the heart of the stone world, once sealed in numbness, something had changed. One morning, a young Varkari boy climbed the cliff where Lyra often sat. Instead of bowing silently, he held out a small object, a stone with a hole in it. Inside, a shard of glowing ship metal. "It sings," he whispered, "when light passes through." He didn't know it was a sound-reactive crystal. He only knew it made his heart ache, in a way no words could explain. Elsewhere, a group of Varkari warriors lit a fire, not for warmth, but to sit around it. They didn't speak, but their eyes looked in the same direction. When a faint melody played from the music chip Lyra had left behind, none of them walked away. In the gray council room, once called the Cold Hall, Raek placed his hand on the old battle map, the one marked with wars, losses, betrayals. He drew his blade and carved a new symbol, not for a victory, but for a heart that survived. Raek was no longer a commander. Lyra had no wish to be a queen. They were just two beings, one of stone, one of fire, rebuilding a world, not with weapons, but with trust. One evening, they walked side by side through the moss-covered path once a training ground. There were no stars above, but the crystals Lyra had scattered now shimmered like constellations beneath their feet. Raek stopped, took out the small cracked stone she once gave him. "I used to think stone never changes," he said, "but maybe stone just needs fire long enough to soften." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. And fire needs stone so it doesn't burn itself away. In orbit, the Union still sends patrols, but no one ever finds Lyra. No one hears from Varkari again, because that place no longer sends distress calls. It has learned to live, not through signal, but through life itself. And if one day someone asks who saved Varkari from extinction, no one will say Raek. No history book will mention Lyra. There will only be one inscription carved into the stone, right where the flame pillar once stood. Here, fire once arrived, and stone chose to be alone no more.